Welcome, everyone. This is just a really great day for me. I get to fill in for Mayor Troy Walker in sharing our legislative policy committee meeting today. And I got to also fill in a little bit for Mayor Kapusti this morning as well. So I'm super on being the backup quarterback that has shown up.
I was doing fiscal.
Now that we are getting started, everyone's got your lunch. The first order of business is that we need to adopt the minutes from our November 13th meeting. Those were emailed out to everybody in advance, and I'm assuming that you spent your weekend reading those while putting up your holiday decorations and you're prepared with motion.
Go for it.
All right, we have a motion and a second motion from Mayor Shepherd, second from Mayor Tran. Thank you, Davis County friends. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I'm assuming that Carson will tell me if we have any people online that want to make comments. Failing me, we will assume they approve. Awesome. So the next order of business is that we need to have a call for volunteers for the fiscal response team, and Justin is going to tell us what that team is.
Ooh, there we go. All right, fiscal response team. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, I guess, at this point. So as many of you know, during the legislative session and leading up to the legislative session, the fiscal analyst office reaches out to us to get fiscal impact information about various bills. So what that means is anytime there's a bill drafted, lots of different agencies, lots of different entities across the state give information as to how that bill will impact our budgets, what the fiscal implications will be, and we have to respond to those very quickly. We have 24 to 48 hours to give a response on those bills, even faster during the legislative session. Oftentimes what we've done is we reach out and say, who can give us some information on this? We would like to be a little bit more targeted this year. So what we're looking for is a small but intelligent group of individuals who would like to respond to us very quickly when we ask for fiscal impact information. City managers looking at you, or can we get one of your budget people? But if you are interested, we just need a handful of people. What we're hoping is we can email this handful of people and they give us a quick take on what any given policy may look like as far as a fiscal implication. If you were asking, do the fiscal notes that we put in impact whether or not bills pass? The answer is depends. So if it is a state bill that impacts the state budget, then they hold on to those bills until the last week of the session if the fiscal impact is greater than $10,000, because it impacts the state budget. If it has a local impact, they put a note in there and says something to the effect of this bill could impact cities to the tune of whatever, $1.5 million or something. And that does not impact whether or not the bill passes. It does not hold it up in the fiscal process. But what we've been able to do in the last couple of years is track the aggregate impact from all of the various bills on municipalities. So we shared that with leadership last year. We shared it with the governor's office and said, if all of these bills pass, there will be $112 million in impact, or more, whatever our numbers are. And that's helped us to shoot down some bills that on their own probably aren't that big of a deal, but the aggregated impact fiscally from a lot of these bills is a huge deal. So looking for volunteers. If you're interested in helping us out, shoot me an email. My email is jlee, J-L-E-E, @ulct.org, and you can be part of the elite fiscal strike team that we will have during this next legislative session. We'll get jackets and matching badges or something. All right, the next couple thing we want to talk about is, speaking of fiscal impacts, the governor released his budget just last week in a couple of different pieces. Raise of hands, how many people have read the budget cover to cover? We did. We went through the budget and we're present at both the press conferences. If you want to go to sleep quickly, I do recommend reading the budget cover to cover. Now, it is important to note that the governor's budget is worth pretty much the paper that it's printed on. That's the governor's words, not mine. He said it just about a week ago. The governor is required to present a budget, but it is really a recommendation. The legislature does not have to take this budget, doesn't have to do anything with it. But the budget is out there as a really good starting point for discussions and signals where the governor's priorities are. So we just want to highlight a couple of things that were in the budget. We sent out an email last week about this. I just want to highlight a few different things. First one on growth there, 81.6 million in water. I point this out because a lot of this, unlike the last couple of years, is much higher level system-wide water infrastructure. So we had some things that were more locally targeted this last couple of years. That one is a much more global look. We're going to talk about a few more of these in detail, but $150 million to the Utah First Homes Initiative. We'll highlight that in a second. 45.5 million to affordable housing. Good government is mostly state government things. Scrolling down here, alleviating homelessness. Molly's going to come talk about this a little bit more in depth. But $193 million is what the governor is asking for toward alleviating homelessness. Like I said, Molly's going to talk about that a little bit more. Under some more growth, so this first one, Utah First Homes, governor's proposing $50 million in assistance to first-time home buyers, building off the program that President Adams has passed that is already out there, but putting more money into helping first-time home buyers. 75 million into infrastructure expansion, 25 million to housing innovation and construction. Looking at different things where there are actually grants for housing innovation, looking at the community trust model that exists in a few places in the state, and building out some of the sweat equity programs that already exist in rural Utah, both expanding those and looking at expanding those into urban Utah as well. And then a few more things in government highlights. We've got these out in emails. These will be in the slides if you want to look at it. But just want to make you aware that the governor's really focused, and we are going to be very focused as always on some of the homelessness and some of the affordable housing efforts that are out there. So that's what's coming up. With that, Molly wants to come up. I know she wants to come up and speak about her favorite subject. Which, although she's been assigned to for 2 years, has not been fixed yet. But homelessness. It's a joke. Molly does a phenomenal job on this. But
I always
we like to
appreciate constructive criticism. Thank you. So as Justin mentioned, the governor's budget is more of an indication of his office's priorities, not necessarily the be-all end-all outcome, but we were really impressed to see substantial funding going into this year. Over the past few years, we've seen a lot of policies that have gone into place for winter response plans, Code Blue, and some other policy mechanisms that cities need to implement without any dedicated funding either for the cities or the service providers. And it's kind of created this system where, as Mary Sweeney mentioned earlier, where you're kind of always robbing Peter to pay Paul to try to kind of keep this system together, but it's always been very patchwork. And so the governor created this budget, investing in a holistic support system to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. The current policy landscape, as of right now, is that we have Code Blue functioning in counties in the 1st and 4th class. I got a notification that Salt Lake County will be going to Code Blue tonight. And then we also have our winter response plans that is operational in Salt Lake County, and 2nd class counties are getting together and starting to work on those plans. We also have 2 new facilities that have come online in the last month. Tooele has come online with an emergency shelter, as well as permanent supportive housing and childcare, like a very comprehensive complex that will be providing all these services. And Sandy also came on, or is coming online. They just had their ribbon cutting with their shelter for the medically vulnerable population. So exciting policy updates there. The governor's budget, as was mentioned, $193 million. 128 is for emergency shelter. 100 million, 10 million is ongoing, 90 million is one time over the course of the next 3 years. That is to help support homeless services, We have 25 million to develop new facilities, 2.5 million ongoing for the shelter city mitigation. This is what we had asked for when the city stepped up to help cover those deficits that our shelter cities were facing. So cities put in more money last year, the state put in one-time money, they're working to make that ongoing money. $10 million for housing preservation, 10.6 for home court, which is more of a behavioral problem solving court that they're going to be piloting in Public County. 8 million for behavioral health, including getting more practitioners into the field who can help folks who need it. 30 million for deeply affordable housing, which I think other folks will talk about later. And then 851,000 of ongoing money in addition to Medicaid expansion to help unlock some additional federal assistance for rental assistance, things of that nature. There weren't a ton of new policies that were mentioned that directly apply to cities. Largely just funding to help support the systems that they've already built. They are looking at adopting a sequential intercept model. Again, this problem-solving court in Salt Lake County, a liquor store roundup. So essentially, you know, if your bill is $8.91, you could round up to the nearest dollar. And then prevention measures that we're seeing in the housing suite that they'll get into, reviewing civil commitment standards and potentially, again, those additional facilities. As of right now, it is unclear if those additional facilities are conversations that have been in the works that just have yet to come into fruition. Expansion of current facilities, or if it truly is something new that we don't know about yet, and is going to continue to work with legislators on that. And then as far as we know, in regards to legislation, we're really just expecting a cleanup bill right now for HB 499 to fix some technical errors that were in that bill. So that is what we're looking at with homelessness. If there's any questions, I'm happy to at least try to answer them, recognizing that we haven't fixed this yet. We have a long road ahead of us.
Thanks, Molly. Next, we're going to jump to infrastructure districts, which, to be fair, I've been working on for a year and a half, and so haven't cracked either. That's maybe the theme of this meeting. None of this should feel too new. We spent some time talking about the current proposal under infrastructure districts last month. So if these slides look familiar, it's because they are pretty much the same slides, with a couple of small tweaks. But I've got Bob Reese here from the Office of Legislative Research and General Counsel. He's the drafting attorney on this bill. So our goal for the next few minutes is again to review what the bill proposal is in its current form, to talk about it from a technical perspective. We're not going to be taking a position on the bill or proposal this time, although we are going to ask you about your comfort level once we get through the discussion, and then to if there's anything we need to give feedback on in the draft or some of the concepts, then Bob's going to be here to answer questions that are beyond me or to hear some feedback on that. So one, just going to review first off what the current proposal is. So the bill creates a new type of special district, an infrastructure financing district, relies primarily on existing special district code in Utah Code 17B. The creation is done by a petition signed by 100% of the property owners, which includes governing document provisions that include how the district transitions from an appointed to an elected board, which Bob, if I'm correct, they don't have to, but they can decide to go down that route. The district is separate and distinct from other political subdivisions, so this would just be a new district. The board member or a board member does not have to be a resident in certain circumstances, including consent from all the owners, and the district does not include any residents. Property tax rate is 0.0004. That is, I think, the lowest tax rate that existed in the special district code, so that's what Representative Dunnigan wanted to go with. The property tax revenue may not be used for repayment of the bonds. The lien on the unit has to be paid off before a certificate of occupancy is issued, and there's specifically no eminent domain authority. And then final slide here, special district cannot levy or collect tax revenue that exceeds the certified tax rate unless there is an elected board of trustees. And no later than 180 days after all the debt is paid, the district shall be dissolved, and there's mechanisms for that in the code. So with that, questions or comments? If there's technical questions, then we're going to let Bob answer them, and if there's comments, I will listen. So, Bob, but questions or comments on this current proposal? Carson, you have some online?
Yeah, Paul Larson online asked if you could just highlight how this differs from the current bid law.
When you, Bob, so I'll do the high level, and Bob, you can correct me where I'm off here. Under the PID law, it's the local government who ultimately authorizes the creation of the PID. The PID is allowed to levy the property tax after the time that the owner is there. So you can have different people, depending if they land in the district, and someone across the street is not in the district with a slightly different tax rate. Anything else you want to highlight there?
Those are the major highlights.
Those are the big ones in my mind, where we're different here. Yeah, Bob, come on up.
Just to clarify, and by the way, I'm Bob Reese, attorney with the Office of Legislative Research, General Counsel. And I'm here not in support of or opposing the bill, not to advocate for it, but just to explain it. We're a nonpartisan, impartial office. We don't take positions on bills. I wish the sponsor were here, he could do that more. But the previous draft did say that the district could not levy or collect a tax unless it's an entirely elected board. That feature has been removed from the bill because of bond council concerns about it. So just wanted to clarify that.
Is the bond council concerned that it's on this one?
Yeah, I think that if it were restricted to just the elected board, most of these would not have an elected board, maybe ever or for a long period of time. And so that was kind of an illusory government powers provision if they had, if they can only exercise that power if they had a fully elected board.
Okay, that's an important distinction there. That has been one of the concerns for sure. Other questions, comments?
Is there a draft available of the bill?
There is a draft available. It's on the, we shared it last month. I think there have been some slight changes, but I can shoot it over to you, Craig. It's on the political subdivisions committee, heard it last month, and it's public on their page, but I can shoot you off the draft that I shared last month. I looked at it, was pretty much saying that you shared it the other day. Hey, any other questions or comments on this? Yeah.
I'm assuming this is to overcome the objection that, you know, I'm surprised. You know, one of the main objections I've heard to PIDs was, you know, the person who buys a house, you know, later finds out they've got to pay a lot higher property tax than their neighbor across the street that wasn't in the PID. Is that? So I'm assuming this is trying to avoid that.
That, yeah, the idea of paying it off at the time of certificate of occupancy, yes. The homeowner would not have that tax on them or a surprise tax for their home. Bob, I know one of the questions that's been asked that I'll ask is, why certificate of occupancy instead of, say, building permits? You know where we landed there?
Yeah, in fact, I just want to clarify that too. The requirement to pay the assessment off before transfer of title applies just to residential owner occupied property. Does not apply across the board. So if it's a residential owner occupied property, that assessment has to be paid off before the. And I think the trigger right now is help me tired.
Yes, so it's,
Is it the certificate? I can't. I'm not ready. Okay, certificate of occupancy.
Carson, yeah.
Question from Mark Richardson online. How many times can they refinance or subrogate the debt?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Don't recall it.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any limitation in the bill either. So there may be a more technical answer there that I'm not qualified to answer about.
Justin, once a individual property is released.
Wait for the mic, wait for the mic.
To get online.
Hi, I'm Ty McCutcheon. If you don't know me, I'm a developer. I've been working with the ULCT committee and Justin and Cam and others on this for about almost 2 years now. So it's good to be with you. With respect to the subrogation question,
because these bonds are not intended to remain in place for forever, it's a little different than a PID bond where you could, in theory, refinance multiple times. You could refinance these, but once a given property is released from the encumbrance, they aren't involved anymore in the debt. So the intent here, and I'll back up for a minute and give some context. The reason for this new tool isn't that PIDs aren't a great tool. In fact, in some cases, they're better for the developer. However, we recognize the reluctance and the slow take-up of them across the state. And so there are billions of dollars a year in this marketplace for financing public infrastructure that we are not accessing. And so the thought coming out of the ULCT work group was, well, how do we get more of that dollars flowing to build greenfield infrastructure primarily? But any public infrastructure can qualify. And so this district was meant to be a narrow pathway where a landowner could go directly to formation and to access those public finance markets. And because of that narrow pathway, there are a number of restrictions that the legislation place on that district's creation and governance. One of them is the type of debt, which is essentially modeled after the Assessment Area Act. And so there's a certain amount of debt that can be levied. It's got a statutory cap as to the amount of proceeds to the value of the improvements. It's 1/3. So it's very low leverage. It also has a 20-year term, and it also has this feature of needing to be repaid in full and the property released from the encumbrance for an owner-occupied residential use. The view was that sophisticated commercial developers that build an office or a retail center, well, of course, they can work that out, and you don't have the risk of them coming back to the city saying, I had no idea that, you know, this office building I was going to buy had an assessment, because that's the business they're in. So those are some of those features, but as to the subrogation question, it's almost a moot point, because once a homeowner's property is released, it would only benefit all the remaining owners if there was lower costs of capital. Until the date of release, of course.
Okay, other questions, comments? Yep. Okay, first in the back.
My first question is really important. Is anyone else noticing that the Dr. Pepper syrup is out? Because it's really bumming me out. My next question though is, often when we've heard this concept talked about, it's been about building affordable housing and unlocking pathways to affordable housing. I'm not hearing that in this proposal or in any of these guardrails, but that's how we're unlocking this. So you're looking at a financing tool, which I know is the favorite phrase of some. But it doesn't appear that it's unlocking it for the category of housing that we've been charged to push and help create. So I'm curious to hear more about that aspect.
So I could go along with Kate on that, and that is that it sounds like we're hearing two different things. It sounds like we're hearing C of O, but then we're also hearing owner occupied units. What's to say that a developer couldn't just build 1,000 units and hold on to them and rent them, and then it doesn't do what we've been charged or been asked to do to help with, and that is to help create affordable home ownership for those first-time home buyers. If it is it really, that's the question that I have, is it really C of O? Because if it's C of O, then it really doesn't matter if it's owner occupied, because it's a C of O when it gets released. Or is it different than that? And there's two caveats. That's if it has to be both, then it is not doing what it is intended to do, right? The whole thing about the bond market and the infrastructure financing was to get lower interest rates. Well, this could potentially provide lower interest rates and no future or further owner occupied units that would be more affordable.
Liam, do you want to bring that up for Bob first? Yep, Bob answered it on the CFO.
Yeah, it requires both. It requires both the owner occupied residential and a certificate of occupancy. If it's not an owner occupied residential and there's a certificate of occupancy, it doesn't trigger the requirement to pay it off.
It's a great question. I think there's a number of layers, as we all recognize, to solving the affordability crisis. This particular set of tools was not intended to solve all of them. The objective of this effort was to get the tens of thousands of lots that have been entitled around the state for which there is no infrastructure to develop them. So one way we solve affordability is to close the gap that we have in the number of housing units in demand versus the number of housing units that are on the ground. And that number has bounced around over the years, but let's say it's 30-something thousand units across the state. So it's an attempt to close that aggregate number of units on the ground by opening up lots that you guys have all entitled, but for which there is no infrastructure available, and they're unlikely that in the next few years there will be infrastructure available, because we want to take that burden off of local government's balance sheets and put it on the development community to open those lots up. So it does not specifically say, well, this many units are affordable. That's true. I think there are other tools in the toolkit to do that. But in terms of opening up units that are approved that should be built, that's what it's meant to solve.
Okay, yeah, other comments, questions?
Just on the district here, we have a lot of money coming from the state, or a lot of oversight from the state, but is there gonna be a requirement for reporting or an audit every year or every other year on the outcomes? Are we meeting our goals and objectives of these districts? Any reporting requirements from to the state on the districts?
So, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong here, I think this, because it's creating a new special service district or a special district, it would be the same requirements for any other special district, as far as I know, there's not a different reporting requirement here. Should there be, that's a different question, but that's how they're currently
Should
drafted.
there be, and what are those requirements? Is it an annual basis that the requirements are reviewed? Curious.
Bob, do you have any thoughts on that one? And by the way, I just, not to bury the lead on this, we're gonna ask you two questions in a minute. One is comfort level, with the current draft, and two are what other items or guardrails would need to be in place for you to be more comfortable with this. So that's maybe one that adds in there. This is what I'd like to see.
I'm not concerned with the good developers who we want to have access to capital at better rates. I'm worried about the vultures who like to hang out, particularly in neighborhoods like mine. I represent Rose Park, and we tend to attract vultures when you have lower land costs, who do things like promise affordable housing and never deliver it and take advantage of every public dollar. Do we have anything written in here for those who would take this tool, take the public trust that is being given to them in addition to a lower interest rate, and penalize them in some way? Like, I would love to see a blacklist come out of this of people who can never get a public dollar again. But I'm not worried about the good developers. I have my list of people who I want developing in my neighborhood, who I want to get low interest rates for. I am terrified that we are becoming opportunistic and like just laying the meat out for the vultures.
Okay, a couple more comments if anybody has them. We do have a couple other easy topics to tackle this afternoon. Carson, anything else online? Yeah.
It's a great question. The important part of what cities retain in all of this is all land use control, all land use approval, all approval of improvements, the improvement plans, the acceptance and turnover of the public improvements. So a developer or a landowner can't just go borrow money to build infrastructure that doesn't already have an approval. Yeah.
They brought the ball and we're left with this constituency.
Yeah.
And unbuilt, yet somehow still there.
Yeah. So if the city has absolute control over the land use, if there's a development agreement or if there isn't, what gets built and how per city standards, all of those regulations are controlled exclusively by the local jurisdiction. The developer doesn't get to say any of that. What they get to do is say, instead of going to a bank and borrowing money, which, oh, by the way, is probably not available today for a variety of reasons, happy to talk to you about what those are. But for public infrastructure only, within this already approved project, they can access the bond market to build that infrastructure that ultimately is turned over to the city. So I would think it would be on the city to make sure that all of the things that they would want to see in a land use approval. I understand that things go wrong, but what I'm saying is that I think that the cities in great measure have the tools to decide what gets built, how it gets built, when it gets built. Those are all within the city's purview. At the end of the day, this is a narrow financing instrument, not a land use authority or, you know, a city engineering department or public works department that gets to decide what gets built and how.
Okay, I'm gonna move to Slido. You want to respond?
I'm just living in reality with this going on. And it's a question of sovereign power in the name, it's a really show sovereign power in the name of a financing tool, whether or not it can actually be used. I'm not worried about the people who follow the rules. I'm worried about the people who don't, and I'm worried that we are putting a sign on us with Olympics coming, with Major League Baseball coming, with all of the development we've already sustained in a growth trajectory. We're putting a sign on us that says, please come take advantage of us. I'm not worried about our homegrown good people. I'm worried about the opportunists who will come and exploit our constituents. I represent blue collar workers who do not have margins to absorb this kind of risk.
Hey, so going to Slido. Give me a second to jump off there. Go to slido.com, number 1910411. And can I ask you this first question? Oh, we'll go back. Oh, do we need to open it? Sorry, one sec.
Yeah. That's what we say.
For all you kids in your QR codes, you can't type the number. And it's so hard typing numbers, I know. Okay, there's a QR code for anyone who doesn't want to type numbers. All right. There we go. Okay. All right, how do you feel about the infrastructure district proposal as currently presented? Are you very comfortable, somewhat comfortable, neutral, somewhat concerned, or very concerned? Again, we are not taking an official position today. There's still some drafting to be done, but just like to get a straw poll on this one. This may be the most response we've ever had with the site. I'm gonna leave this open for about 15 more seconds. All right, and jumping to the next one. There we go. All right, what guardrails would need to be in place to make you more comfortable with the infrastructure district's proposal? So what if anything is missing that would make you more comfortable? I'll give you about a minute to respond on this one. All right, so let's see, about 18 participants, I think, so I'm gonna leave this open for just a couple of seconds. And by couple, I mean like however long I decide. All right, so as always, this is not an official position, of course, we will come back. Once we have a more updated draft, or if there is a more updated draft, we'll come back, have more discussion, take a position on this. As a reminder, we do have one more LPC before the legislative session. January 8th, we are going to be meeting again. We have gone back and forth for months about whether or not we needed to hold that meeting, but given all of the moving pieces, we are definitely going to need to hold that meeting and take a few positions before the legislative session begins. So thank you all for that input. Thank you. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Ty, for coming and joining us on the discussion. With that, I'm going to turn over to Cam to talk about one more problem that somehow we haven't cracked despite years of working on it.
Thank you, Justin and Bob, and Ty, and others. And thank you to all of you as LPC members for that feedback. As we tell you every time at LPC, we go through all of the LPC results in Slido to help build out what the next steps are in a particular issue. Our internal LPC subgroup on infrastructure has given a lot of feedback. And that's where I felt like today was the last chance to get the broad feedback from the full LPC before we take a vote on it in January. We're going to pivot now to the governor's First Homes Initiative. Justin referenced the governor's budget. Mr. Gruber, you will be pleased to know that I've been treating this like the unified plan and have been carrying it with me everywhere I go. The other Gruber will like that too. Yeah, the other Gruber will like that too, you're right. But the governor was very pleased when I pulled it out of my bag the other day. This meant somebody was actually looking at it. And I assured our entire staff had read it cover to cover. And we highlighted in Friday Facts some of the key provisions. And this morning, the league board met and approved the direction of some of the underlying concepts around some of the budget requests around housing and homelessness, transportation, and the like. We're going to talk right now about the policy on the starter house piece. As we mentioned in the last two LPC meetings, the governor's indicated that the starter homes, or now known as the First Homes Initiative, is his priority number 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the upcoming legislative session. Wants everybody to stretch. We have the league board principles that they adopted back in the spring. And then here are all the different moving parts. We had the housing audit that was released on November 14th, the day after we met at LPC. Out of curiosity, how many of you have read the housing audit? I have that in my bag too, if anybody wants it. Okay, so about half of you in the room. I won't ask online how many read it, but hopefully you read the league response letter that we had. It's at the end of that document. You know, the Envision Utah recommendations guiding our growth. The state housing database is going live this month. And while it is still not complete, it will at least be another step in the direction of showing holistically what's happening in the housing space. And then on December 1st, the league officers, Justin and I met with Governor Cox for about an hour and a half. That's actually the fourth now face-to-face meeting we've had with the governor in the last 3 weeks on the housing initiative. So that gives you a sense of his urgency around it. And in addition to nearly daily meetings with the staff, including this morning, Steve Walter, the newly appointed senior advisor for housing, met with the league board for over an hour and had a great discussion with them about what success looks like in this space. He was announced on Tuesday. His first day on the job was Thursday. And on Thursday, he met with the league officers. And then he met again with me for another hour on top of that. So 3 days on the job. He's already had 3 long engaged meetings with league leadership. And Steve Walter, for those of you who have not interacted with him, he is as good as they come when it comes to building consensus and being focused on collaboration. And one of his key messages to the board today that he asked us to relay to the broader LPC today was he's focused on getting to an outcome that makes a positive difference. So he said, I work with the governor, yes, but the governor said, I want this outcome. I want you to bring people together to figure out how to get to the outcome, and let's figure that out together. Then, of course, there's always in the back of our minds the actions in other states. So last month at LPC, we asked you several questions, which I'm not going to try to tag back and forth between computers. I'm not yelling at Phil to do that, nor am I asking Carson to come up and do it. But on this computer are all the LPC Slido results from last month. So I'm just gonna give you a quick overview of what you told us last month, which has then informed what we've been doing for the last 4 weeks. So first, we asked you, what is an owner-occupied starter home? And the feedback that came back was that an owner-occupied first home, we're gonna start using that term because that's the term of the governor's mission, first home, has to be actually affordable. And in some places, in most places in the urban areas, 450 is not affordable for a first-time home buyer. It needs to have a variety of housing types, because a single family detached may be affordable at that price point in certain areas, but in a lot of cases, it's not going to be affordable at that price point. So it needs to be, needs to include different housing types. We talked at length at the board meeting this morning about mixed-use development and housing projects that are going in those mixed-use developments, and how we have to crack the code to get condos and not just apartments into those mixed-use developments. And then you also gave us a lot of feedback around housing size, lot size, and other things. So we had 56 comments that then we funneled together into those key things. We asked you last month, how comfortable are you being able to require a developer to build X% of housing units as first homes? And you told us then 74% of you said you were somewhat or strongly comfortable with that sort of requirement. And then we asked you, what is your city doing or could your city do to facilitate more first homes with the limited tools that you have? And you gave us a slew of concepts that you were already doing to try to facilitate this. And so we've gone through and organized those concepts, and those range from modifying setbacks to density bonuses. Several people brought up, how do we legally require that something is owner occupied, rather than just, it's a new density unit, but it's a rental unit or it's investor owned. How do we make sure we get to that piece? And then what are all the challenges that come with that enforcement? Likewise, we asked you last month, what are the right metrics to show what cities are doing in this space? Again, there are things we control, but there's a lot that we don't control about the market. You gave us a slew of concepts of what those metrics could be, ranging from the statewide development capacity to what percentage of your housing stock is owner occupied versus renter occupied, etc. So we've been taking all of this feedback that you've given us through those meetings, and what we presented to the lead board this morning, and there's several lead board members in LPC right now, were these key principles, and the board generally adopted these principles as the framework for the upcoming deliberations in the next few weeks. What they want to emphasize is a framework is not detail oriented, right? The framework is, here's the big picture, and there are a lot of details to still work out, but this is what the board said we're comfortable with. This is a framework, and then here are all these questions about details that we need to resolve. So first, avoiding one size fits all state mandates. Second, defining starter homes. So in other words, defining first homes in a way that actually means first homes, and that is both in type as well as affordable home ownership with a financially sustainable infrastructure. And then the terminology we use is path forward. So the path forward, and actually we should have switched the starter home to first home. We did that for the title when we did update the PowerPoint slide after the board meeting. But to have requirements on builders, but also incentives for builders so that we can find that common ground, recognize the infrastructure challenges, don't punish cities for things outside of our control, but also require cities to do as much as we can control in that space. And if we don't do our part, then you have consequences apply similar to what exists right now with the MIHP framework. Before I move on here, Carson, are there any comments online? Okay, so the microphone's coming. In the last few days, basically, Steve Walter was hired Thursday. We sat down with him, and he basically reiterated in the meeting this morning, Lee, bring me something. So bring us something that could work, something that you're willing to offer that would actually move the needle. I want everybody to bring proposals that are workable and to make it a stretch. And he reiterated that message this morning. So since last Thursday, we put together a small group of city staffers. Right now it includes these cities. We do welcome a couple more participants from smaller communities, but we're trying to keep it small enough And it's this work group that's gonna be putting the details onto the bones of that framework. So I wanted to let you know, we've got a cross section here of redeveloping cities and rapid growth cities. Certainly would welcome 2 or 3 more from smaller cities to make sure we've got that broad participation as we're building out the details on that framework. First, and I do have some Slido questions, so don't you worry about that. First,
Question of mine from Brett Milburn is, why is the initiative limited strictly to new construction? And I'll elaborate, are there any efforts in the governor's office to expand that to existing inventory?
yeah, great question, Brett from Draper. And this came up when the league officers met with the governor on December 1st. We had one of our mayors who actually asked that question point blank at the governor. With all of the potential state dollars that are going toward the first home initiative focused on infrastructure and the like, could the first time home buyers program apply to home buyers of existing housing stock? The governor's response was very direct, and he said, absolutely not. I want to achieve 2 different policy objectives with the home buyer assistance program. I want to help home buyers, but I also want to spur new construction. Part of the reason, though, that we have been saying that the definition of the first home needs to be broader than just single family detached is in a lot of redeveloping areas. The opportunities for new home ownership is going to be in an infill townhome or a condominium type complex. And market's not really producing condos because of financial reasons. So how do we bridge that gap? But I was called you Commissioner Milburn from many years ago. Sorry about that, Brett, but the point is a good one. Our officers asked the governor point blank, and as of now, his focus is on state dollars for new construction, but not for existing units. I will come back to the existing unit policy piece in a second, though. So Carson, if I forget, just remind me. Okay. So here are just some of the ideas that have been floating around out there. I've referred to them as rumbling 1 and rumbling 2, because I've had legislators who've grabbed me just in the last few days and said, what about this or what about that? Rumbling 1 would just be simple upzone. Mayor Alder, you passed out the article, and you said it's from the Daily Statesman, right? Utah Statesman, is that what it's called?
It was a Utah State student, but it was published in the.
Liam, can you get a microphone for Mayor Alder?
It was written by a Utah State student, but it was published in the Standard Examiner. And it's called Upzoning Could Be an Easy Tool for Tackling Housing Affordability. And the premise is that when we, in 1916 or something like that, they started the codes for detached homes. And somehow everybody thinks that if you have attached homes, it ruins your property values. It's not true. And somehow we're going to have to start having higher density and not half-acre lots everywhere because we're running out of land. It's less efficient for utilities. It's less efficient for water use. There are lots of things that are good about attached housing, and somehow it's gotten a bad name.
Yep.
So anyway, I've got the article, and if anybody wants it, it was in, I think, Thursday's.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and Chief Estes, as people are walking in, but just the concept of state zoning, that's not new. There are multiple states around the country that have done that in recent years. So rumbling number 1 is a legislator who grabbed me a couple weeks ago and said, I've got a bill file open, and I just simply want to do that, okay? Rumbling number 2 would actually be more akin to a moderate income housing plan option, where if you do this option, then you qualify for some infrastructure dollars, but similar to IADUs, you would have to apply in a certain percentage of your city. So these are just 2 examples of multiple examples that we've heard from legislators in recent weeks of what about this, what about that? Which is why we went to the board this morning and said, either we say no to all these other ideas and just hope for the best, or we say no to these other ideas and bring forward a different framework. So what's kind of listed here as the framework is basically within this table, again, lots of details to still be worked out, but efforts to identify what the policy would look like. So every city of a certain size would have a requirement to do a first home type policy that would include a variety of tools on either the density side or the land use process side or both. So essentially, each city would say, okay, in our city, in order to facilitate first homes, we're willing to do these things. But then that gets to I should have numbered this, but third from the bottom, the owner occupied price requirement, actually having the assurance, the guarantee that the outcome is more affordable home ownership. And Mayor Palmer, I'm gonna put Harriman on the spot here because Nathan gave me some data before one of our meetings with the governor's office last week that I think illustrates this point perfectly. That there's a housing product in Harriman right now that's 10 units to the acre, right? Okay, good. I don't have it in front of me, so I'm making sure I can say it correctly. 10 units to the acre, single family detached. The city granted the zoning, the dialogue with the developer early on was we're gonna try to make it more affordable owner occupied product. The outcome has been those 10 units are currently on the market, single family detached units, they're all over close to 3,000 square feet or above when you count the basements, and they are all selling for $630,000 or more, right? So the very fair frustration from cities across the state is that we did this, and here's what the outcome has been. So it's obviously gets frustrating to have state leaders say you have to do more of this. You're not seeing that outcome. So again, you hear that concern loud and clear, and what we were discussing with Steve Waldrop this morning at the board level was, can we figure out some sort of path where the developer is incentivized to do certain things, but if the developer does those things, then they're required to provide some of those first homes as part of it. Then the second to last line here, you'll see the term credit, but this is also acknowledging that there are a lot of communities out there that have a significant amount of existing housing stock. So the Brett Milburn point a moment ago, that even though the state dollars are not targeted toward existing housing stock, if every city was required to do some sort of policy, do you take credit, or can you take into account what is already existing or planned for in those communities, while recognizing everyone still has a role to play in increasing the overall stock? And then the last piece is that state compliance, where you could have MIHP as the model or some sort of default zoning as a consequence. And then the incentive is infrastructure money to help close the gap that unlocks the housing units. So I acknowledge I just threw a lot at you. And you know, the board spent over an hour with Steve Waldrop this morning. We don't have another hour here, but we now have the board framework, which is a high-level document that we're going to be filling in the details. Well, we told the board we we're going to ask you to help us fill in some of these details through Slido. And what's a housing discussion LPC without some Slido? So first question is, what do you think about the concept of every city of a certain size being required to have some, and I should have updated the language to say first home. So there'll be first home, the mix of incentives and requirements to facilitate actual first homes. And that gets to the definition of success, right? So we're not just trying to get more $630,000 units, but to try to get to actual first homes at that lower price point. Justin, how many people fill that your slide out? Not that it's a competition, but
Well, I had over 80.
got over 8 now. All right, I'll leave it open for another few seconds.
No,
Okay.
are these pity votes now?
Yeah, video votes are coming in now. Okay, hope this is helpful. Because this was one of the exact points that the board went back and forth on today of whether it should just be an option or whether it should be required. So an interesting split, but leaning in the somewhat comfortable space. But obviously the details matter. Okay, so this gets to the credit concept I was describing. If the city already has housing stock or has planned for a lot of first homes, should you get some sort of credit for that? Again, details matter, the metrics matter, but should you get some sort of credit for that? Which also means on the flip side, if you're a city that maybe doesn't have this existing housing stock, or you haven't planned for it, and now you're starting to get a bit of a sliding scale of what's required in different communities. So I just want to be clear about that. Mr. Bass.
Thanks, Pam. Just related to this question is not so much whether cities should get credit, but whether or not the first time housing assistance should be available to purchase that product as opposed to only new construction. So I know that's different than you're asking, but that's related.
You're right, it is related, and as I said, right now, both the governor and the president have said absolutely not. So we've asked the question, but I think this is another way to, address that point to a degree. Okay. Speaking of credit, I do think University of Utah basketball program should get some public credit for beating BYU not once but twice in the last couple of weekends. Am I right? Anyone? All right. Where should the policy apply within cities? Now, before you answer this, let's just do this thought exercise here for a second. So, if the city adopted a first home policy, you could say it can apply anywhere in the city, and then the city and the developer work together. Think of it almost as like a conditional use permit process. Okay, now they're screwing up my order because they were all building on this house. Whatever. Okay, so you have the flexibility to determine where they go. The second one is the fixed minimum percentage. So this is the IADU approach, where you say is IADUs, they have to be allowed in 75% of the city, but then the city had some guardrails you could have around that, but that was the target. So that was the fixed minimum percentage that applies to all zones in the city, so not just purely residential. And the other one applies just to residential zones, and then the other one is this. Now the question that is not on here, is I expected people would want to have flexibility. The question that's not on here is whether or not a property owner can automatically trigger it. So it basically becomes a by right thing. Well, the good news is we're not taking motions right now, and so.
That was a delayed reaction to the BYU Utah conference.
Oh, very good. Very good. But in all seriousness, I do think one of the rubs we're going to have here as we get into the deliberation is the city set the policy, and then a property owner can take the policy and apply it wherever the property owner sees fit. Whereas the city adopt the policy, developer or property owner requests it, and then you work out how to apply it. So Carson, you got to answer.
There's been a couple of comments in the Zoom room about cities or concerns about cities being held accountable for outcomes that are out of their control. And the two examples we brought up where cities have planned for the more affordable product and it's ended up much more expensive. I was wondering if you could address that with the governors within this kind of general framework.
Sure. And who asked that question, or is that just a general theme?
There's both Ken Latham and Gina Chavez raised that.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, North Salt Lake and Holiday, actually really interesting counterpoints here on this, right? So let's go back for a second to the station area plan model. The station area plan, as a reminder, the bill sponsor for station area plans was the one and only Steve Walker. So during the conversations we've had with him since Thursday, the conversation inevitably comes back to the stationary plan model. As a quick refresher for those of you who either weren't around 3 years ago or in cities that don't have fixed transit, we walk through the framework of the stationary plan model. So if you are, Cameron City is always a bad city, so Justin City. So if you're Justin City and you have a fixed rail station in your city, you are now under an affirmative mandate to do a stationary plan within a certain distance of that transit. The state has set the objectives of you need to consider housing affordability, you need to consider transportation connectivity and economic opportunity and environmental sustainability. Those are the objectives. But then each local government defines how to meet those objectives in a way that makes the most sense in your plan. And the example we gave over and over again 3 years ago was, it makes no sense for the state to mandate a minimum residential density at every track stop. When you have a track stop at Salt Lake International Airport, then you have a track stop in downtown Salt Lake. Clearly, you should have a lot more residential in a track stop in downtown Salt Lake than you ever would at the airport, right? So the model of the stationary plan was essentially the state objectives and then local flexibility to build out a plan to maximize those state objectives. But the flexibility was really left to the locals. And then there's the certification from your peers through the MPOs. So again, that was the model that we negotiated 3 years ago with Steve Waldrop. So now fast forward, Steve Waldrop is in this role, and his mind's mainly going back to like, we threaded the needle around state objectives, local flexibility, stationary plans. Can we do something similar around the first home initiative? Now, a key component, and this gets to the question that Gina and Ken asked, is there were exceptions built into the stationary plan model. So the easy exception was if you had environmental degradation within your distance of the track stop. Because it didn't make any sense to say, we're gonna plan for a whole bunch of housing on an area that's contaminated and can't really be cleaned up. So there were ways to say, we can't do this because of these reasons that are outside of our control. And that was acceptable, that's acceptable in the statute, right? Like this gets to the one size fits all, and recognizing not only is every city different, but every piece of property is different. So Gina and Ken and everybody else, I think there could be space for that same sort of nuance here of, we're gonna do everything we can to plan for first homes, but there are gonna be certain things that are just outside of our control. And there needs to be an acknowledgement for that. Again, it starts to get complicated. That's why you see the other states do what Mayor Alder was referencing from that op-ed. It's just much easier to do the California model, where you just say, we're gonna allow upzoning by right anytime, anywhere. That is much simpler. And the framework that we're presenting you, trying to get feedback on here, is more nuanced, it's more complicated, but it's also provides that flexibility to take into account all those circumstances. Of course, I'm looking at you to see if I can feel from Ken and Gina that I answered the question sufficiently. While I do that though, let's move on. Before you answer this one, let me give context. So right now we have certain consequences in place for non-compliance of MIHP. And that applies to cities over 5,000. And if you're found out of compliance by DWS, and you've gone through the cure period and the appeal, then under current law right now, you're ineligible for state transportation dollars. You're ineligible to access fifth dollars that just went into effect last year, and you pay a fee towards the only one. So we could kind of combine these pieces, right? Another option could be to say that the state creates their default first home policy. We need to update all these questions, say first home to start. But state kind of creates like, here's the template. So basically, as a city, take your choice. You come up with your own approach, or you either default into ours, or if you don't do it, then it just automatically comes in. This is similar to what happened in the Montana legislature last year. The Montana legislature said, this is land use policy for cities of a certain size, unless you choose to go this other way, and all the cities to date have chosen to go the other way. But it looks like still felt strong, like let's use the consequences we currently have. But you know, decent number of folks saying, you know, the default may be worth looking at, but yeah, those numbers are going a different direction. Mark, Mayor Shepherd.
What if you just said your starter home policy is part of your moderate income housing plan and not an optional piece of it? So, you know, there in that MIA, you've got the ability to choose this, or this, and your, you know, what you're able to do. So let's make that mandatory. It's probably one of them.
So I can't pull a slide out of thin air, but it's an interesting idea. So as a reminder, MIHP right now, your city with a stationary plan, that is your fifth required venue option. Okay. If you do not have a stationary plan, if you do not have a station in your city, then you have three or five. So essentially, Commissioner, you could approach it a couple of different ways. You could say it has to be one of the three or one of the five. So that's one option. Another option is you say it's now number 4 or number 6. Or another option would be to say, because the baseline is still 3 or 5, but if you want the additional prioritization of state dollars, which is already built into code right now, that if you do 2 more than what's required, you get prioritization, you could make this that. So if you do this, it gets you the additional prioritization. Like you could take any one of those 3 approaches, and I think they all have some merit. Liam, Councilmember Betro.
Does the state have a mechanism? I would just hate if there was a community that couldn't keep up or do something because of capacity issues. I'm fine with those who just won't do it being penalized. Is there a mechanism for discerning between those two? I don't want to do like a Greek austerity thing where we just keep taking money away from someone who needs it because they're not performing.
Yeah.
And they continue to not be able to perform.
No, it's a great point, and I appreciate the fact that you're here as an elected official from the biggest city in the state, recognizing how difficult it is on some of these smaller communities to keep up with the mandates they are. Well, right, but I do think it's important, because even Salt Lake City, being the biggest city in the state, has had difficulties keeping up with a lot of these requirements. And my hunch is Providence doesn't have the same resources that Salt Lake has, right?
True.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, Providence doesn't, and there are a lot of Providences. So anyway, I appreciate you as a solid elected official by pointing that out, because that's a real concern for everybody. I know I'm gonna answer for it, but I think it absolutely needs to be part of the dialogue. So let's go. Do you still want me to go to South Weaver or Clinton or?
You can come.
Oh,
It's just a week.
my turn.
We talk a lot about sticks in these conversations where penalties on the cities, but is there any talks about allowing more incentives for cities, like implementing design standards back into play, or allowing us to regulate the size of those units?
Yes, sir. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm down the Slido rabbit hole, so I can't go back to my pretty little table, but so you know what, John, I'm gonna come back to it, because when I can get back to my pretty table, I can show you kind of how I think that exact point fits into this. I also think it lowers the neighborhood opposition if the density is designable. Okay, Norm.
So can what does a starter home policy even mean? I believe that we already have policies that allow this, right? We talked about this morning in the board meeting, it was talked about one city has a minimum size requirement of 1,000 square feet. We have a 900 square foot requirement minimum and 5,000 square foot lot. So in essence, we already have a starter home. We have policies that allow that. The question that I have is, what are you going to do on the development side of things? I'm fine with them mandating it to us, but again, we've already done that. I have 5,000 square foot lots that have 3,000 square foot homes that are $600,000. That's not affordable. That's not solving the issue.
Yeah,
So I believe that we already have policy in place. Are we talking about another policy that says something different?
Excellent point. Dovetails to what Trevor said a second ago. Let me finish this with my last Slido question, right? Yeah, that's my last Slido question, and then it comes back to my table where I can more easily Norm and Trevor hit you guys' point. So this is the infrastructure piece. Steve Waldrop, in our first meeting with him last week, the first thing he asked was, what could $75 million in the governor's budget appropriation request buy in the infrastructure space down on council meetings? And one of our reps in the meeting basically said to him, we could buy you 3 water tanks. And that's, you know, if we're lucky and if supply chain challenges don't get worse, if inflation doesn't get worse, you can buy 3 water tanks in the state of Utah. In other words, it's not going to go very far. That said, he asked us, will you ask your members, do you have projects right now in your city that if you could get an infusion of capital, they're already entitled and they're ready to go, can you give me what they are, where they are, how many units, etc.? Because that'll help bolster the governor's case. So we've collected a lot of them anecdotally. So like in the Yes and Tell League staff ASAP, like I can tell you several that people have told us that we've been sharing with the governor. So if you're in that yes section, grab ULCT staff, make sure we know what the project is. If you're in the unsure section, please find out. If you're in the no category, follow up with the developers in your community, because we've got the data from 66 cities around the state that show all of these entitled units. And Senator Fillmore has asked how many of these entitled units are just short infrastructure versus how many of these entitled units are still several steps away from being able to get to that point. So we're trying to better delineate where the 190,000 entitled units are in the state in your land use process. So looks like it's kind of evenly split between no and the other two. Liam, do you have somebody who wants to? Okay, Lynn, and then I'm back to my table.
Sorry, Cam, just Lynn Pacer from Sandy City. I just want to follow up on the questions that were asked earlier, and that is when you're talking about first home policies, I think it would be helpful for all of us to know whether we're talking about something more than just increased density.
Yeah.
And that may be reduced parking requirements, reduced setbacks, whatever that package is, because when you ask, do we want that citywide? Are we okay with it? Or are we not? I don't think we all have a common understanding of what those policies would be. And for most cities, all we can do is create smaller lots for the developers to build on. But the experience that I'm hearing in our community and among others is developers don't want to build a $400,000 or condos. And so all we continue to get are luxury or market rate rentals. And no matter what we do at the local level. So I don't know what more the state wants us to do beyond what we're doing to try to make this happen.
Yep, excellent points, Lynn. And so let me come back here to the concepts of the framework that the board tasked us with this morning. So I'm just going to go line by line, top to bottom under the ULCT board framework column. So first is you have to have the policy, which for many but not all communities is consistent with some of what you may already be doing. Okay. The second piece is really the density, land use process, land use regs. Like that would all be on the city side. So density, land use process, land use regs. Is there a way to make modifications to incentivize first homes? And those modifications could be that, we're going to prioritize a project that meets this criteria and consider it within a certain period of time. Or it could be, we'll offer density bonuses if it meets the criteria of a certain percentage of first homes. So the second, third, and fourth boxes, density, land use process, land use regs, those are the types of things that cities can do, many of which cities are already doing. Okay. But then the next two ones are house size design, owner occupied pressure farm. This gets to what is expected on the private side. And then what's expected on the private side could include limits on the size of the house, or restoring some design standard authority for cities, or allowing us to better regulate the use of short-term rentals or investor-owned property so that residents are the owners and owners are the residents. The most common way to do that is through deed restrictions. They could be based on minor rights. Deed restrictions also bring with it another complication around enforcement. But this is basically that concept of we'll offer incentives or prioritization on this side, but in exchange, we want to make sure that the 10 units to the acre example I gave from Harriman, those units aren't going to be sold at $630,000. And so getting the developer in the city to the table to figure out how to make that happen. The city says, we'll put together this policy, developer comes in, we want to use the policy, and then you figure out how to execute it, as opposed to an alternative of just statewide upzoning and hope that upzoning results in affordable homeownership. Correct? As the mic comes over, the second to last box is that the credit for units data. This is really credit for what you're already doing. So if you, in Santa Claus case, Norm, if you're already doing those pieces, figuring out the venture to go, so yeah, Santa Claus is already offering all these tools, and property owners just aren't taking them up on it. So Santa Claus shouldn't be punished for things outside of your control, right? Right?
Just a thought I had, there are some community reinvestment agencies, redevelopment agencies, whatever you want to call them, that have housing funds. It makes sense to try to make these funds available for first time housing. And they could do, loans or, interest finance, all kinds of things, there'd be a lot of flexibility. Right now, I think they're pretty much all on, have to meet the 80% of the county. But affordable housing is the goal. We're saying it is from the governor. Maybe the law should be changed to allow those funds to be used for first-time housing incentives.
That's a great point, Craig, and that was one of the recommendations that actually came out of the CHOP that we had proposed, was that right now your CRA RDA money is has to be at the 80% piece, but there's no language in there about owner occupancy. So often what occurs, and those of you who use CRAs and RDAs regularly have seen this, that the redevelopment occurs and the residential units that come in are usually rental units. And then to get to the 80% AMI, you're usually doing studio or one bedroom type units. They're not really family friendly units. Salt Lake City has been working on their RDA policy to try to get RDA dollars, to prioritize RDA dollars for family friendly units. And what will be in one of the bills this session, because it came through the CHOP, we recommended it, was you could use your RDA CRA funds up to 100% AMI if it's for owner occupancy and in those mixed use areas. So it's not just necessarily, like, wouldn't be for owner occupancy for a traditional single family detached neighborhood, but it could be to help get owner occupancy in a mixed use area with condos or townhomes. Up to 100% AMI. And that was one of the recommendations that both the Progressive Coalition and the League agreed on, to have that flexibility through owner occupancy. Okay. Recognizing feedback is possible. Is there anything else? We don't have a slide question on this, unfortunately, but we probably should have, just like an open-ended slide questions. But is there anything else that comes to mind that you want to make sure, as we're working through the details of the framework, that you want to make sure that we are considering? Because LPC won't meet until January 8th, and a lot's going to happen between now and January 8th. So are there any other points that have not come up yet in this meeting that you want to make sure are considered? Let's go, Trevor and then Carson.
Have there been any conversations about regulations on the developer side, like disclosure wise on these new units that they're buying, they're developing and selling, what their markup is, what the market looks like, because there's no incentive for developers to reduce costs or prices. In fact, they may increase prices because they know they can get state subsidy on new homes. So is there any conversation about that?
No, great point. I mean, it's two different ways. One, just general transparency, and the second, the deed restriction piece. So on the general transparency, I had a pretty heated back and forth with someone representing the development industry a few days ago, where I brought up this point of we need to have more transparency in the cost inputs going into these housing units. And the response back was, for the private sector, that's not, government is transparent about those pieces. We're fundamentally different because we're the private sector. And he's not wrong, right? It is different because it's the private sector. That said, if you're receiving a public benefit, right? If you're receiving a public benefit, then there needs to be that sort of acknowledgement. And that's where really probably the best tool to get there would be the deed restriction side of having that sort of requirement up front in a development agreement or otherwise to say you're going to get these benefits, so therefore there are these expectations of you. So yes, we brought the transparency piece up. I think it's an important piece. I do think the legislature is going to be hard. The legislature is not going to want to go down the path of requirements on the private sector that they would view as anti-business. But there has been an acknowledgement from different state leaders of the market's not building these units on their own. So how do we get the market to build these units? And I mean, I've heard the term deed restriction come up quite a bit the last few days, because that's really the tool that you have to make sure you get to the outcome. That said, currently under state law, we are prohibited from requiring deed restrictions in base zoning. So it's all part of the conversation. Let's go, Carson and Matt.
There's been a couple of comments online about home size and home design, which I think has generally been covered. Mayor Danes asked a question about eliminating the residential tax deduction, the primary residential tax deduction for somebody, an investor who owns a second home and rents it out, to try to encourage that home to be sold to the market rather than owned by an investor.
Yeah, so pause there, Roger. There you are. Carson, you just take your mic, mic stay there. Roger, can you just address what the Constitution says? Because you gave me a nice tutorial on this a few weeks ago.
The Utah State Constitution grants the residential exemption for property that's used for residential purposes. It has nothing to do with ownership. It's for the purpose of residential property. So out of state and if people in it are full-time Utah residents, then they're eligible, that property is eligible for the exemption. It's been that way since 1982. To make any change to limit that to say, even though it's used as residential property, you're gonna have to change the state constitution. I would say the big challenge with the residential exemption is increasing it, not restricting it. That's how we really end up fighting. So I understand that exemption is for any property, regardless of who owns it, if it's used to provide residential property, residential as full-time residents. The property that is used as second homes by individuals is taxed for 100%. Property that is used as Airbnb is taxed 100%.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Roger. But Mayor Danes, it is a great point, and it is kind of a source of frustration that the investor-owned property gets the same property tax break as the homeowner who's also the home resident. But it would require constitutional change. And constitutional changes happen, and there may be constitutional changes on the property tax exemption this year. But as Roger said, the trajectory has been to
Make them bigger, not smaller.
make it bigger, 55%, and not smaller. Let's go, Matt. Last comment, because we have a few more items to get to on the agenda.
Just a real quick comment, follow up on the deed restrictions as one of the best tools. And I'd be curious, I think there's a lot of discussion that needs to be had around how can we get the development community at the table talking about deed restricted units. The alternative, unfortunately, would be that a lot of cities may revert back to down zoning everything in order to bring the development community to the table to say, hey, we need higher density. Great. In exchange, let's talk deed restricted units. I don't think that's the direction we want things to go. I think if we can find a solution, but we are going to need input from the development community to help us understand what brings you to the table in a partnership role where we feel like we're working together in this. Otherwise, yeah, cities might be faced with that dilemma to say, well, the only way to get you will be to down zone, and we'll do everything by development agreement, which is not best practice.
No, great points, and I've heard that exact concern from developers. And if pendulum swings too far that way, that came up during the Commission on Housing Affordability several times this year. Okay, next steps. We've got the framework from the board this morning. We'll be working through the details. I asked a moment ago, really what we need is just a few smaller cities that can help participate with us to build out some details that we can bring back in January. They are expecting something from us this Friday, so this has been a great discussion. And if other ideas come to you as you're driving back to City Hall, send them our way. We'll be meeting with our work group later this week. But this has been a terrific dialogue, and it's been very, very helpful for us. Okay, then we quickly do an update on land use task force and transportation, then we're done, right, Justin? There's not an agenda before this.
Yeah.
Okay, good news is we can skip through a lot of these. Okay, what's highlighted in yellow are updates. We brought these particular issues to you in previous meetings. 2 meetings ago, we told you we were waiting on language. Last meeting, we had language. We asked who wants to see it, so we can get feedback on it. Several cities reached out to us. We sent it to you, got the feedback. And then last week, we sat down with the Property Rights Coalition. And somebody said, I think Matt, you said we need to make sure we've got developer input about how to actually get to the table. One thing that is very unique about Utah compared to other states is we as league staff and league reps meet all the time with the development community, trying to figure out paths forward. That doesn't happen in other states on either the league side or the development side. So, the feedback you give us, we're constantly trying to have those conversations back to them. Because again, at the end of the day, what we want is policy that's actually gonna make a positive difference for the outcome that we want. So I wanted to point that out, because I talk to folks in the development community basically every day in some form or fashion. So here's the update of what we agreed to last week. We're going to bring it back for you just so everyone was aware that on the sidewalk installation time, the problem that the developers were trying to solve here was what happens when you build a sidewalk, you're doing the construction, the sidewalk gets torn up, and then you have to rebuild the sidewalk. It adds to the cost of the unit. And of course, we want to make sure sidewalks are completed in a safe way. So what we agreed to last week was before you get the C of O, the sidewalk has to be in. But you could do a sidewalk specific bond that for 18 months in order to get your building permit, so you didn't have to build the sidewalk twice. But there's still the assurance that if the project fails, there's a remedy to get the money to build out the sidewalk. On the setbacks, window wells, landings piece, we talked about this at our last meeting. Again, the idea here was you've got the footprint of what an allowed house is. This gets to the lot coverage piece. We have examples of some cities that were not allowing landings. And by landings, we're talking about the steps that enter in and out of the house, not the party deck type, but the landings. Some cities would allow those in setbacks, some wouldn't. And if the city didn't allow it, it forced the home builder to redo the plans, which then added time and cost other things. Well, we brought up concerns about when, on one hand, you have lots of cities that are reducing setbacks, particularly rear, or not rear, but particularly side setbacks. So if you're reducing the setbacks, but then having landings extended to setbacks, you run into issues of fire code and other safety issues. So what we discussed last week was, okay, if it's in the rear setback and it's small, 32 square feet, nothing bigger than that, then that would be allowed by right in setbacks. So it still has to be attached to the unit, right? It really is like the steps. You walk out of your kitchen, you've got the steps, or you got a little landing and the steps down, that would be allowed in a rear setback per state law. We're finishing the drafting on those two pieces. So again, you guys speak now or hold your peace on those two. Going once, going twice. All right, I think we're married. Okay, on this one, on the land use task force, Jared, can I put you on the spot to explain where things are at right here on this one? Because there's been a ton of back and forth on number 8 here. You can come on up. Transportation will take about 2 minutes, and then we'll be done. So we apologize.
Yeah, so the conversation here was really between public infrastructure and public landscaping and private landscaping. Cities are still able to require the public landscaping bond before the building permit or the C of O is issued. But as far as private, withhold a building permit or a C of O for the private landscaping. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Any questions, any thoughts on that? Isn't
that already the case? Isn't that code or state? Wasn't that changed last year anyway?
Well, good question. I think that this would provide some clarity with certain cities on how some cities interpret the current code, and this would help define what those parameters are.
Thank you, Jared. Been more on point on that one than I have. We do expect the water districts want to continue a conversation, Norm, on this. So the issue is still going to be out there because it's water efficiency challenges and around landscaping. But that's the language that's gone off to ledge research. Okay, transportation items, this will be quick. Governor's budget request, the board this morning endorsed the concept of additional investment in the transportation investment fund to expand transit dollars and as well as the transit innovation grants, which was something that had come from us. It's in the governor's budget, but just a smaller amount than we had requested. And then on the transportation utility fee, our work group has seen the draft. They provided us with some feedback. We're sitting down with Bob Reese, who's the bill's drafter. Bob's now left, but we're sitting down with Bob later this week. So this is another one, speak now or hold your peace. If your city wants to see the language there, it's still protected draft, but if you want to see the language, let us know so we can get feedback. This draft is almost ready to go and it'll go public soon, and our staff recommendation will be to support it in January once it's public. But if you have either your city has a transportation utility fee or you're interested in, you want any more details, make sure to grab us. Okay, with that, I will turn back to Justin to summarize what comes next. But let me just thank you for your participation in LPC this calendar year, and I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season and a Merry Christmas. And we really appreciate your service to your communities as well as your time as LPC. Out of curiosity, do you have anybody in the room who is leaving office at the end of the month? If anybody in the room who's leaving office at the end of the month? We may have some online. If there's anybody online who's leaving office at the end of the month, thank you for your service to your communities. Everybody else, we'll look forward to picking up where we're leaving off in January, and just I'll let you walk through that. Thanks, everybody.
Then yeah, Kate, we will need you for a motion to adjourn. So yeah, just quick things coming up. We do have our newly elected online training this Saturday. If you have newly elected in your community who are not signed up, we can, I think still probably get them signed up. January 8th will be our next LPC. January 16th, legislative session begins. The next day is local officials day. I'll look for more information on that. And then our next, our first LPC of the legislative session will be January 22nd. Same room we've had in the last few years will also be online. And then that will be every Monday through that last Monday in February.
So excited I get to conclude this meeting for Mayor Walker. I have a motion to adjourn. I heard it so moved. I have a second. All in favor, please say aye. All right, see you all in January.